Junior Witter has long been viewed as one of the most guarded and silent men in boxing, until now. In his book The Avoided, he talks about the hate that he felt from the late great Ricky Hatton and his family. He also reveals how personal tragedy underscored his bout with an American legend, and discusses what in his career he would do differently. Witter, of course, won every title from British to world, but for a variety of reasons, he never got the credit he deserved. I think his book, like his career, will split opinion. So I'm about to discuss the main themes in the book and give you my honest thoughts on it. So Witter's late foe Ricky Hatton obviously takes up a large part of the book, and Junior mentions that the British public really saw him as Darth Vader and Hatton as Luke Skywalker. I should mention right at the start of this video that I would imagine this book was actually finished being written around the time that Ricky very sadly died in September 2025. Witter only discusses Ricky's death right at the end of the book, as he didn't want to change the emotions of what he wrote. He writes, "Sleep well, Ricky, and I'll see you when I get there. Your old pal, Junior." While the two were slightly more friendly in retirement and started to reconcile their differences, in 2002 Hatton actually vacated his British title when Witter was his mandatory. Throughout the book, Witter says Ricky was scared of him, and says Frank Warren, who promoted both men, didn't want the fight. He also says Ricky's family were running from the fight too. And while The Avoided is sloppily edited in quite a lot of places, I did really appreciate how candid Junior was when speaking about Ricky. One thing which really surprised me was that Witter wrote that he could really see and feel the hate that Hatton had for him. He writes about how Hatton once said that he would fight Witter in a local car park. One other Hatton who developed a dislike for Witter was Ricky's mum, Carol. Witter says she hated him with an absolute passion and would have fought him herself if she could have got away with it. On one occasion, to get to his nemesis, Witter actually boxed with Hatton's name on his shorts. Carol, sitting at ringside, was irate. She shouted, "How dare he fucking put our name on his shorts?" I did like how Witter covered this event because it sounds like he really had a sense of humour about Carol's dislike for him, and I kind of quite liked how he would just try and wind her up like that. In terms of the fight itself, Witter is adamant that there was nothing about Ricky that really worried him. He thought he was a dirty fighter, perhaps in the mould of, but maybe not quite as good as, Evander Holyfield. Witter says that once Hatton would throw punches on the inside, he would step to the side and catch his rival with counter hooks. Although they were more cordial towards each other in retirement, Junior confesses that they were never really friends. Ricky did though invite Junior to train in Tenerife with him, but they could just never work out the dates. And I can just imagine just walking along the beach in Tenerife and just seeing Ricky Hatton and Junior Witter just going for a jog together. I mean, what a sight that would be. One of the most emotive parts of the book is where Junior actually attends Ricky's funeral. So Ricky's people actually reached out to him and said that Ricky would want him there. And as Junior sits there, he's just thinking about all the people across the years who have said that, you know, Junior and Ricky would actually really get on well. So Witter writes about the funeral and he's looking around at the likes of Tyson Fury, Liam Gallagher, all these absolutely colossal names who just came together to pay their respects to Ricky. They all listened as the boxing presenter Adam Smith termed Ricky as the people's champion, and really I don't think anyone could have put it better. Witter talks about growing up in Bradford in the 1980s, and it was just really upsetting to read about the level of racism that he and his family experienced. In fact, the boxer claims that it was actually his father who persuaded him to start boxing as a means of defending himself against people. He recites multiple times when he was chased down the street and says he developed a sixth sense for when he was about to be attacked. Although this gives great context over what it was like growing up in that part of the world, quite a lot of these anecdotes aren't really expanded on and the writing is sometimes quite dry, and this for me is one issue which I felt just cropped up a couple too many times in the book. Once he started fighting at Bradford Police Boys ABC as an 11-year-old, he was a natural. He thrived under the tutelage of Alec Allen, boxed as a southpaw, and then won the junior ABAs in 1990. He developed a reputation for being a defensive stylist who was impossible to hit and came at you from awkward angles. His gym mate John Thaxton said, "Who wants to fight someone who you couldn't hit with a handful of confetti?" So despite his power and winning pretty much every belt in boxing that you could win, Witter was very much in the avoided club, hence the title of the book. That said, in 2008 he fought Timothy Bradley in one of the most emotionally fraught evenings of his life. Indeed, the day before Witter lost his WBC crown to the American legend Timothy Bradley, his father actually entered chemotherapy for cancer. The whole build-up to the fight was absolutely chaotic for Witter, who only after the bout found out he could have got it postponed. So Witter's father was initially diagnosed with cancer in early 2008. Witter writes how this was such a shock because his father, who was in his 60s, was actually super fit and active for his age. So as Witter's father's condition worsened, Junior overtrained in the gym and couldn't sleep in the weeks leading up to the fight. He said his mind wasn't right and he just couldn't be bothered anymore. 2 weeks before the bout, he actually told his gym mate Johnny Nelson that he had overtrained for the bout. Johnny urged Witter to tell the coach, Dominic Ingle. Junior just said, "Well, if I know I've overtrained, then Dominic definitely knows." And this storyline in the book was probably one of the most interesting, but this was one of multiple times where I just felt like the prose was a little bit jumbled and I had to kind of keep going back and forth to work out where we actually were in the narrative. So the ghostwriting wasn't brilliant in places. When he was walking to the ring to face Bradley, Witter termed himself as dead behind the eyes. He said at the time he just didn't give a fuck about the title. Inevitably, on the night, Witter was usurped on points. Back in the dressing room, Witter's promoter, Mick Hennessy, told his boxer that he didn't actually know anything about the overtraining and about the situation with his dad. Mick said that if Witter's coach Dominic Ingle had told him, he could have got the fight delayed. And I just think Witter must have been absolutely devastated at this point with everything which was happening in his personal life, in his family, and in his career. Witter said he felt fucked over by the people who were meant to be guiding his career. And although Witter would actually go back down a few levels and pick up a British title once more after losing to Bradley, his resentment towards the people who are looking after his career and the boxing industry in general is a constant theme throughout the book. During his career, despite his skill and undeniable talent, Witter wasn't well known, he frequently put on boring fights, and he wasn't much of a trash talker either. In fact, he regrets not putting more into the promotional side of the sport. He writes, "I should have been more savvy with the business side of the sport. He just didn't have that knowledge at the time, as he freely admits throughout the book. He believes he was too loyal to certain people throughout his career too." While he doesn't clarify who he means, he actually does discuss the likes of Prince Nazim Hamid and Kell Brook leaving the Ingle's gym, so we can safely assume that he is actually discussing how he perhaps wanted to leave the Ingle's gym but maybe felt a bit too loyal to them. Towards the end of his career, Witter felt that Dominic Ingle, his coach, was focusing too much on the career of Kid Galahad. Indeed, before Witter's matchup with Ahmed El Moussaoui in 2015 in France, the last ever fight of his career, Dominic told Witter that he and John Ingle would not be able to work his corner. Instead, they were attending a court date with Kid Galahad. Dominic said he'd arranged for Witter's nutritionist, Greg Marriott, to work his corner. Witter writes with real passion here and says he was just furious with Dom and pissed off to fuck. I do feel really sorry for Junior here because throughout his career he never really got the rub of the green. He was, more often than not the away fighter, and he just didn't really have any kind of luck or profile. While Dom and Witter's relationship soured towards the end of Junior's career, Dom's father, Brendan Ingle, was a huge influence on Witter. We've already covered how conflicted Junior felt about the boxing industry as a whole, and Brendan summed that up when he said, "Boxing is worse than prostitution." So let's get on to my final thoughts. So, although, as I mentioned, there is some really interesting stories in here, I just felt that the book was just like really poorly edited and also quite badly proofread as well. There was quite a lot of typos throughout the book. So, it's ghostwritten by a guy named Jamie Boyle, who used to be a boxer himself. And there's a moment where Witter describes himself as being like a WWF villain. Now, that organisation changed its name to WWE in 2002, many, many years ago, and it wouldn't have been that difficult to just double check that. So, parts of the editing just looked a little bit sloppy here, and it just didn't really leave a great reading experience in places. When Witter talks about John Thaxton, the name John is also spelt in two different ways throughout the book, so it's sometimes quite confusing to actually work out who he's writing about. And there are places where the prose is just a little bit garbled, and it's sometimes quite difficult to determine what scenario and what situation he's actually talking about. But that said, Witter does tell some great stories about facing Zab Judah on 9 days' notice, and around that time he had a bit of like a confrontation with Mike Tyson, who was quite good friends with Zab Judah and fighting on the same card. So as Witter was preparing for the bout, Mike Tyson will be kind of in and around the same room and just kind of really staring him down. He also writes about Nazim Hamid, who just became so unpopular in the Ingle gym for how he would mock fighters. He talks about being attacked by Cam Rayside's fans after beating their man on his pro debut. And this is a great example of an anecdote in the story which could have been really explosive, but it just wasn't expanded on at all. So for a British fighter who enjoyed so much elite success at world level, The Avoided is a great trip down memory lane with so many exciting stories, but I just feel like it lacks that level of editing to really be, pushing towards a high 3 out of 5 or even a 4 out of 5. So there you have my thoughts on The Avoided. Thank you so much for watching. Please feel free to like and subscribe if you have enjoyed this, and see you soon.